1 week before the historic second impeachment trial against former President Trump is set to begin, both sides are submitting their cases.
In a series of briefs, 9 House Democrats say Trump endangered the lives of all members of Congress when he spoke before a group of supporters ahead of that siege on the Capitol. But his legal team says the upcoming trial is simply unconstitutional. News Nation correspondent Joe Khalil live again for us in D.C. tonight with more on this story. Joe.
Yeah, Robin, with a week out before this case actually happens, the trial actually happens, this is the first glance that we're getting at how both sides are going to be making their case. The impeachment managers laying out in detail, meticulously, step by step, how they're going to go through the process of trying to get a conviction for President Trump. And we also saw the same on how his lawyers are going to be defending him. Really, it's our first look into what we're going to hear and what we're going to see next week. Tonight, we have a first real glimpse into what the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump will look like.
I think the president should be tried. I hope he will vote to be convicted.
Democratic impeachment managers say President Trump was singularly responsible for inciting an insurrection at the Capitol. Their 77-page brief goes step by step from the president's refusal to accept election results to encouraging supporters to come to Washington to, quote, stop the steal, to his rhetoric on January 6th. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says if the president's lawyers repeat President Trump's claims that the election was stolen, it would serve as a distraction.
I hope Republicans would see that and realize that they have no argument against the charges brought by the House managers.
Impeachment managers also addressed Republicans' argument that it's unconstitutional to convict a president who's out of office, saying, quote, the Constitution governs the first day of a president's term, the last day, and every moment in between. Presidents do not get a free pass to commit high crimes and misdemeanors near the end of their term.
There's no reason to impeach someone who has already left office.
Senator Mike Rounds says a majority of his fellow Republicans question whether a Senate trial is constitutional.
At this point, I think the facts would suggest that it is not.
And that's at the heart of the defense of former President Trump. His legal team argued in their briefs the Senate of the United States lacks jurisdiction over the 45th president because he holds no public office from which he can be removed.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
President Trump's legal team also argued his words and tweets encouraging his supporters to come to Washington during the Electoral College certification were all protected under the First Amendment, writing, quote, the 45th president exercised his First Amendment right under the Constitution to express his belief that the election results were suspect.
The First Amendment doesn't protect yelling fire in a theater, but the First Amendment's not a protection to criminal activity.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham tells News Nation President Trump's legal team has a high burden. But Graham says personally, he doesn't believe the former president deserves conviction.
What I see is a speech I've already looked at, and I don't think that cuts the mustard on incitement.
Now, we also know from the brief, President Trump's legal team is going to argue that the House didn't give them enough time to prepare because they rushed through the process, so something to keep an eye on there heading into next week. And also this question about whether it's constitutional to actually be trying a president while he's already out of office. The jury is not back on that. There are a number of constitutional scholars that say that it is constitutional, but that's certainly not a unanimous opinion. There are others that would argue back against it, and we're certainly going to continue to hear a lot of that argument as this plays out in a conviction, in a impeachment trial next week in the Senate. Reporting live tonight in Washington, D.C., Joe Khalil, News Nation.
Joe, thank you very much. So tonight we know more about the case each side will make in the impeachment trial of the former president. Who better to talk about this now than News Nation's Ashley Banfield. Ashley, Joe teed you up well there. You said this would be a big day today. Anything surprise you?
I'm super jealous of that, Joe, because he's right in the middle of it all, and I wish I were right there with him. So it's you and me, Joe, who are going to talk in these nerd-like terms that I discussed last night. What I think is so fascinating is a pretrial brief. And it's only because it's the tip of a hand. You get to see where people are headed. And in this direction, although we really knew where they were headed, we get to see the evidence, or at least a sneak peek at what they're going to use, little bits and pieces of what they're going to blow up really big. So if any of this is enticing, Joe, then stay tuned for a barn burner of a trial. And I've got to be honest, as I read this, I did think it was extremely compelling.
So what did you learn? Anything at all today about how the House managers will lay out their case here?
Yeah, and you and I talked last night, Joe, about the nexus between what Donald Trump said at the Ellipse during that rally before the insurrection and the connection to those words that he uttered and then the march down Pennsylvania Avenue. The Democratic impeachment managers are going much further. They're actually taking you back before that to the buildup, everything from election night right through until that fiery rhetoric on the 6th. And I'm going to read a little excerpt that's not my opinion. This is the opinion that comes straight from the pretrial briefs, those delicious little moments that we lifted today that were filed. President Trump's responsibility for the events of January 6th is unmistakable, the impeachment managers write. President Trump's conduct must be declared unacceptable in the clearest and most unequivocal terms. They're doing this connection so that they can actually say he threatened the entire constitutional system. And I'm going to go a little further, and you'll have to just, work with me here. It's a little bit of reading, but again, for the nerds among us, it's really good reading. President Trump fixated on the 6th, 2021, the date of the joint session of Congress, as presenting his last best hope to reverse the election results and remain in power, the Democratic managers write. Even as he continued to improperly pressure the state officials, DOJ, and members of Congress to overturn the electoral outcome, he sharply escalated his public statements. See the nexus that they're going for here, Joe? Using more incendiary and violent language to urge supporters to, and now I'm going to throw a bunch of quotes your way. These are Donald Trump's words. Stop the steal on January 6th. He insisted that the election had been, quote, rigged and stolen, and that his followers had to, quote, fight like hell and, quote, fight to the death against the, quote, act of war. Very, very strong rhetoric. You could argue that's not political rhetoric. That could be considered incitement. Again, this is the Democratic managers' case. They called it the wild rally on January 6th, turning into a powder keg waiting to blow. Indeed, obvious and entirely foreseeable that the furious crowd assembled before Donald Trump at the Save America rally on January 6th was primed and prepared for violence if he lit the spark. You heard Joe Khalil say earlier that they say Trump was, quote, singularly responsible for fomenting this assault on the Capitol after he, quote, summoned a mob to Washington. That would be before the 6th, right? Exhorted them into a frenzy. That would be on the 6th. And aimed them like a loaded cannon down Pennsylvania Avenue. Again, that's on the 6th. If provoking an insurrectionary riot against the joint session of Congress after losing an election is not an impeachable offense, the brief said, then it is hard to imagine what would be. Tell me that's not exciting, Joe.
Well, we'll see soon enough, but I don't know how much it means to people who have this argument that it's unconstitutional because you can't impeach a president who isn't in office. So I want to ask you about that specifically, Ashley. Would Chief Justice Roberts have ruled on that? We're all talking about this argument. Where does it go?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think it's the entire question, the unconstitutional question, which basically means, hey, we shouldn't even be in the Senate chamber. There's no grounds, there's no standing. This is not a process that we can actually move forward on because it's all moot. So it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter how fiery the rhetoric is. It doesn't matter the videos that you bring into this case. If we're not even supposed to be here, then we don't even need to hear any of those ugly, ugly details, right? That's going to be pushing it, I think, a lot, though.
Does someone rule on that, though, Ashley?
Well, I think what's going to happen is that the Trump lawyers are going to posit that actual argument, right? And then the Democratic managers are going to argue it as well. The problem is, Joe, we don't really have precedent, although we kind of do. And I know that's not a fair thing to say because it leaves the viewers saying, hold on, back up. How can you not have precedent and sometimes have precedent? But let me give you at least what the Trump's lawyers are likely to do. Because if David Schoen, who was on Fox News last night, gave us any indication, he said that this is a dangerous road to take, specifically with First Amendment issues. So he really pushed on the First Amendment issues, saying that you put politicians into all sorts of peril if they're not allowed to use fiery rhetoric like fight, 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 or, let's take them down, that kind of thing. So that tells us that these lawyers are not only going to argue the constitutional issue, they are also going to argue the facts, saying this is just rhetoric. But here's the issue that I think we need to stop this whole discussion with, and that is the precedent. Because if they're saying there's no constitutionality for this, they may be wrong in the fact that there actually is some precedent. And I thank our crack researcher, Aidan Choate, for this. She found 20 federal officials already impeached in the history of America, and 3 of them were after they left office. One of them was a senator, North Carolina Senator William Blount, a founder who signed the Constitution. How about that? Number 2, a federal judge named Judge Wes Hughes Humphreys, 1861, Tennessee. Out he went after office. And Secretary of War, a cabinet secretary, Joe, who was also impeached after he left office in 1876. So all 3 of those very unique positions outed after office.
All right, a busy day for sure. Ashley, thanks for summing it up for us.